Nailed it. Nailed it. Oh wait, shit. No, I didn't. Fuck. Oh, god damn it. No, it's supposed to be this one. Almost fucking nailed it. Anyway.
You almost did it.
Oh man. I've only slept up a couple weeks, so that's actually pretty good. Anyway, what's up? I'm James. I'm the owner of PaydirtDFS.com. I'm in a darkly lit room today. Margaret kind of rearranged the house a little bit. We painted one of our rooms and we did some rearranging in here, and there's things going on. So my lighting situation is a little fucked up, but y'all don't care about that. You're here for the Week 15 NFL DFS Slate talk. We're coming up on the end of the season. The burnout is starting to kick in for me personally a little bit. Starting to be a little bit of a grind to put out all of the content, but that's okay. We grind on because that's what we do. I'm joined by Pablo this week. I had a solo show last week. This week I got Pablo. How you doing today, Pablo?
I'm good, man. I feel the burnout. I was asking myself this evening why I'm so tired, and I think there's 3 reasons. Number one, it's week 47 of NFL, and this is just the time of the year when NFL becomes a grind.
Yeah.
Number 2, it's that time between Thanksgiving and New Year's, where you're just trying to get to the end of the year, and it just feels like I don't know. Some people love this time of the year. I find this time of year to be exhausting, completely exhausting. I'm just trying to survive until the end of the year. And then number 3, I was up super late last night sweating an NHL bank. So that is a good reason I'm tired.
Yep.
But as a reminder for those of you listening, if you like baseball, you should play NHL because it's the same game theory, and we have the best models in all of DFS for NHL. So I'm gonna just plug NHL while we're here.
No, that's absolutely true. NHL is a shining light over at Paydirt, and the industry doesn't focus enough on NHL, and I get it. It's because it's in the middle of NFL and NBA season, and the prize pools are not what people want them to be. But man, NHL is just a hell of a DFS sport. It's basically like if you took baseball and replaced pitchers with defense from NFL with a goalie, and that's basically what it is. So there's just a shit ton. There's an extra added lever there, right? Where you don't have
to. And there's also analogous data. There's several good sites. There's Money Puck, which has advanced stats, and then there's also Natural Stat Trick, which is basically the fan graphs of hockey. So our models are great, but if you want to go to primary source data, you can also go to primary source data the same way you can with baseball with fan graphs and look at things like CR or XFIP. So it's fun, man. I feel like NHL every year. I'm very thankful for it that it kind of bridges mid to late season NFL until closer to MLB coming back for me. And because I'm not touching NBA.
Well, because at this point, man, I probably am not going to play NFL this week. Because I always tell myself that usually I end up reducing my volume week 15 or 14 usually. But usually I reduce my volume week 15. But I have gotten my shit kicked in so hard this year that I just don't even know if I can justify just reducing my volume. It might legit just be I move on to NBA and NHL for the rest of the year, and then do my kind of little reset in January. I usually take most of January off from all DFS sports, regardless of whether I have lost the value of I don't know, how much have I, where am I at right now? How much does my car cost? Yeah. I basically could have bought my own car with the losses I have incurred this NFL season.
It's I don't think you're alone. Ryan in the Discord chat was talking about the Leone solo pod. Mike Leone, who I think a lot of people know is a pretty, well-known sharp, and in my opinion, I think he's a well-respected sharp in the small field GPPs. And he did a solo pod this week talking about his NFL season and just cold streaks in general.
Yeah.
And what's really hard about cold streaks is that you have to ask yourself how much of it is process, how much of it is variance. And this NFL season has been really hard. Last week was my first good week since week 4 or something. I finally had a really good week in NFL last week, and then I had a good week in NHL. It's a weird thing with momentum in DFS where I think your brain if you can like build a little confidence, then it begets more confidence, and vice versa. Like if you're struggling, it's hard to like dig yourself out. Some people just grind through it, and some people realize, I think intelligently like you are, that sometimes like it's okay to try to grind through it for some amount of time, but at some point of time, you have to say to yourself, like, if I keep doing this, am I going to sustain losses I'll regret? And sometimes it's just not the best way to kind of turn it around. Like sometimes the best way to turn it around is to take a deep breath and take a break. And that's hard to do, like, because like all of our nature, for those of us who play DFS somewhat consistently over the last many years, is to just like push through, right? And try harder and grind. So anyway, it's a long-winded. I get where you're coming from, and I think a lot of people feel that way, especially with this NFL season. I think it's been tough.
Yeah, it's important. I mean, when you hear, I don't know, I'm like the fourth like high level DFS player that I have heard say this out loud of like, this has been a fucking brutal season, and I have incurred losses that I have not incurred these kinds of losses in like 6 years or something. Since the last time that I was playing like regular volume, I have not incurred losses like this. But I mean, seasons like this, that the big thing, and I swear to God, we'll get on to like the thing that people like.
By the way, like I actually think this is useful for people. Actually, in some ways, like sometimes more than the slate itself. But yeah, so keep going.
Yeah. I think one of the big things this season has been, I mean, obviously we have talked until we've been blue in the face about how bad the pricing has been. I mean, it's been the softest pricing of any NFL season that I have ever seen. And one of the problems with that from a player like me is that in order to find my edge, people have to make hard choices. Like I thrive on people making hard choices and like making mistakes because the game isn't easy. That's how I've made all of the money that I have in DFS. And there's other players like that too, right? One that always comes to mind for me is Brandon Adams. Have you seen Brandon Adams at the top of GPP this year? You fucking haven't, because Brandon Adams doesn't win when the environment is set the way that it is. Shady has had a really hard NFL season as well, because the way that Shady usually builds is not towards like the Giga Chalk. So players like me and Shady and Brandon Adams that look to leverage mistakes by the field hasn't made very many mistakes this year because there have been no hard decisions.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, when you have like 3 underpriced plays and like you have to make a decision, that's one thing. But when you have like 25 underpriced plays, you can miss on like the field, like as a whole, can get several combinations wrong. But it's really, if you build it, like if you just take like enough combinations of those players that are all underpriced, like somebody's going to get the combination right in a way that's unbeatable. And that's what's happened this year. Like between the underpriced quarterbacks, the 1 to 2K underpriced tight ends, and then every week we have enough value at running back and wide receiver. It's really resulted in super high scores that are, especially for large field. Like for large field, it's been like for small field, it's been, do you avoid 1 or 2 landmines and then you like play the strongest chalk that does okay? For large field, like if you don't have pure nuts every week, you are fucked now. You are fucked. And it's really lessened the edge. And that's why people sometimes don't understand why we say like, hey, loose pricing is like not good for skillful players. And the reason is because it doesn't force as many hard decisions. And so anyway, I think, so moving on to this week with that intro, a few things. Number one, I do think the field as a whole is probably pretty burnt out. I do think the field as a whole, I will say, like, part of the reason to lighten your volume towards the end of the season is that only like there's more, the ratio of sharps and grinders to casuals at the end of the year is much higher. Like there's like a lot of the casuals have dwindled and have lost money and are out. And so you're left with like a sharper field in general. I will say, like, if you can like pull yourself together and put forth the effort, like the effort itself in analyzing a slate clearly can be a bit of an edge over a field that is also burnt out. Now, if you can't, it's better to admit you can't and say, I can't, and I'm not going to have an edge there. I like, you know, that gif of like the little girl holding onto the merry-go-round where she's like getting dragged. Like, that's how I feel. And I'm like, I'm just going to do this. Like, I'm going to do this because I'm going to like be sad when NFL is over. But I will say, like, there's a part of me that similarly is like, man, why am I doing this? Like, I'd rather just like not do this right now. But I will say this about the slate as a whole. 13 games. There are, at a macro level, there's 4 very high total games. The Ram-Detroit game late, that's going to be a very popular game with very clear built pathways that people are going to use in a very specific way that we talked about. Baltimore-Cincinnati, which will be used, I think, also similarly, although there are many more combinations because of pricing that you can use in that game that are like, there's more flexibility in the way you build around that game if you want a game stack. Buffalo, New England, that I don't think is going to be very on outside of a few players. And then Washington, New York Giants, that our models and some of the other models in the field, in the industry have as having like pretty good relative value. And although I don't think people are going to game stack, it's going to be more like minis or like a normal stack with a bring back. When we have a huge slate like this, like a 13 game slate, something I always say is make it smaller. So like especially for small field, I just have like a very low threshold to cross games out and cross players out. I want to just whittle it down. I just make it a smaller slate. Like I basically make it into like a 6 to 8 game slate instead of a 13 game slate. And then it's worth pointing out that there's like several other teams with very high totals. San Francisco against Tennessee, Houston against Arizona, the Jags against the Jets, Seattle against the Colts, and the Chiefs against the Raiders. The Eagles against the Raiders. And the difference though in those games as compared to the first 4 I mentioned is that they're very lopsided totals. Like those teams are expected to completely crush them. And it's hard to convince yourself that any of those games can be competitive, to be honest. So it doesn't mean your guys can't get there, but it's just important to be aware that those games have, you know, there should be blowouts, at least most of the blowouts. So just from a macro level, something I like to do on a big slate like this is I try to correlate a little bit more than normal, because I think that, you know, the field gets overwhelmed by the number of options, especially when you factor in the burnout and the late season component. And then I also try to just ask myself, like, from a roster construction standpoint, are there ways that everyone's going to do things that are maybe, you know, sort of too narrow-minded and feel a little bit more creatively done while still focusing on good game environments? And so those are just kind of like high-level concepts I try to think about when I'm building for a big slate like this towards the end of the season.
Yeah, crossing out the bad games is the most important thing, I think, that I take away from all that. I generally think, geez, is my audio like fucking up a little bit? No. Yeah, you want to mute yourself really quick?
Sure.
Yeah, the biggest thing for me when I look at a big slate like this is like crossing out the bad games. Right? So like I in general don't want to play teams that are projected to score 13 real life points. Right? I don't want to play the Jets. I don't want to play the Raiders. I don't want to play Cleveland stacks. I don't want to play Arizona stacks. Like I think that in general, those are just bad decisions to be made. The only pause that I have on that general strategy this week is that Jacoby Brissett and Michael Wilson and Trey McBride still exist. And like, even if they don't score a lot of points, Jacoby Brissett is going to throw the ball 648 fucking times because that's just what they have him do right now. But I mean, in general, like project for 12, project for 13, 13, 14, 15. Like, I don't want to play these guys. They're projected to score less real life points than Tennessee, who can't score real life points. Indianapolis, people are going to be inclined to play Phillip Rivers. I'm sure we'll talk about him. They're implied to score 15 real life points. Like, having a quarterback come out of retirement after hanging out with his literally 10 children for 5 years to lead an offense against this NFL environment I don't know. I think I trust the implied total of 15 there. So it's that's one of my favorite things to do is just say I'm just not going to play these players. The other thing that I usually like to do is say, all right, well, we have all of these teams that are actually projected to score well, right? Like we have San Francisco, Seattle, the Rams all projected for over 28. We have Baltimore, New York Giants, Jacksonville all projected over 26. When we have this many teams in good spots, I just am not inclined to eat much chalk. Because there are so many options here that, like, why wouldn't I just play New England? Why wouldn't I play Jacksonville, New York Giants, Baltimore, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, rather than eating whoever the chalk is? So those are the things that I look for, and I'll let you take it back.
Yeah, is my audio fucked up by the way when I'm talking, or are my headphones doing okay?
I think it is echo back.
Is even when see if when you mute I'm talking if that's still happening. Maybe
no. It's fine until I talk. Like while you
when I stop talking, I'll mute myself. Okay, cool. So from a QB standpoint this week, if we move there, I have a hard time looking at QBs without thinking about stack partners on a slate this big. Like I'm like, of course, like I'm always willing to consider on DK playing naked or skinny running quarterback, of course. But on a 13 gamer with some really enticing game environments, I'm usually going to be trying to correlate my quarterback on a slate like this. So from a pure like pricing and ownership standpoint, I would say we've got 5 or 6 players who are interesting at ownership that I think are important to think about. Those are Lamar at 6.4K, Jackson Dart 5.6, Mariota at 5K, Stroud at 5.2K, and then Stafford, who's like the consensus chalk pay at 7K this week. Suffice it to say, our models, as has been the case all year, prefer the pay downs, which for 2 reasons. Number one, they project really well themselves, and when you factor in their stack partners as a stack, they have really nice point per dollar value. The second reason it has made sense for us all year is that we have priority pay-ups in the flex positions that are not necessarily correlated with these players outside of really Stafford. We have like people we'll talk about in a few minutes, like Gibbs, CMC, Amon-Ra St. Brown, JSN, who are, Jamar Chase, who are very expensive. And so when you have players that are really expensive like that, while you have people like Stafford, who in his own right this week does project really, really well. When you factor in his pairing partners and the price of those stacks, our sims and our models have generally really preferred to pay down a quarterback. And so when you look at the quarterbacks this week, those are, I'm not saying those are the only 5 quarterbacks we play, but those are kind of like the strong model consensus plays across the industry. And there's a few others too that we talk about. Our models, if like you look at the 2x, 3x, 4x just of the quarterbacks, and then you go to stacks and look at the 2x, 3x, 4x of the stacks, and it really is clear that like Dart, Mariota, Stroud at 5 to 5.6K just look way stronger from a relative value standpoint as opposed to like Lamar, Joe Burrow, or Stafford. Now, I will say this about Stafford. If you can find, like Stafford is not prohibitively owned this week. That game has the nuke total, right? Like it's the late game with the nuke total. It's, I don't know what it is now. It's like 54 or something, 53. It's like a really high total with 2 teams that have really good offenses. And I'll just say, like, for an expensive stack with Stafford, like his 2x is still pretty freaking strong, and his median and his ceiling from a raw points projection is still really, really strong. So, like, while I will predominantly still focus on the lower price quarterbacks, I think if you can find enough value through your flex positions, I do think Stafford stacks are very much still in play just because of how strong he projects even at an expensive price. And he's not prohibitively owned. Like he's owned, but he's not like going to be like, I don't think he'll be upwards of like 15% even in small field. So, which is not like, I'm not saying that's not owned, but it's not like he's like 30% or something, right? It seems like most of the ownership is going to Lamar Jackson. for the most part. And I think people who are going to pay down are actually going to pay down mostly for Stroud because I feel like Houston has gotten a lot of attention. They're starting to get their shit together. Nico Collins is fairly priced. Schultz is fairly priced. You've got people like Higgins. So people like kind of want to play Stroud. Plus Arizona is not a great defense. So I think people are going to mostly focus on Stroud and Lamar. I think Stafford will be owned. And I stand by our models take and my point that Stafford's extra expensive, but I think it's worth pointing out that his median and his ceiling are still really, really high in a game environment that should be pretty freaking good. So I don't mind trying to build Stafford stacks in a way that's creative, as long as you can find enough value. The only other thing I'll say about the own quarterbacks is Lamar. Like that Cincy Baltimore game is kind of a decision, and we'll talk about it as we start to go through the flex positions. I do think Stafford, Rams, sort of Detroit stacks are going to be like pretty predictable. Like it's going to be mostly like Stafford, Puka, Colby Parkinson with like Jahmyr Gibbs or Amon-Ra St. Brown coming back. Maybe like a little bit of Devontae, but not that much because he's priced and he's been questionable all week. So people, he's been priced up now. And like it's really hard to do Stafford, Puka, and Devontae. So most people are just going to play Colby Parkinson with one of those two guys. And I think everyone's going to play either Gibbs or Monron. And some people play JMO. Whereas Lamar in that Cincy game, like there's a lot more optionality. Like you've got Likely, Andrews, Gesicki, Jamar Chase, who our models really like. There's more risk. It's not quite as condensed, but I think the build pathways in the Cincy Baltimore game will be less predictable than the build pathways in the Rams court game. The problem with that is that Lamar projects is like, if he wasn't owned, I'd be into it, but he's looking very owned. So like, I still, like you and I have talked about this. I don't think it's a secret that most smart people just feel like Lamar is really hurt. And like, I know people think like he's hurt, but like smart people think he's like really hurt because he's been a shell of himself this year. And I don't know, like at ownership, I don't know. I might have one Lamar, but like I'm not super excited to play Lamar at ownership given what he's done this year. Like I totally get that Cincinnati's defense is garbage and we've targeted them all year, especially with tight ends and who's got Andrews and Likely. But man, I think it's a little bit of wish casting to really want to play Lamar this week. And at ownership, I'm just like not super excited by it. So anyway, I'll pause there.
Yeah, so let me grab some questions really quick, and then I'll go into quarterbacks. You started playing Thanksgiving. I don't know what burnout means. Good for you. I'm happy for you. I've been playing every week, and it's killing me now. You mean like Cleveland last weekend? This is in reference to not playing teams that have low totals. Yeah, I mean every once in a while, like a team explodes at a low total. But like we know, based on a large sample size, that Vegas is usually pretty good at their totals. So, I mean, I usually side with Vegas on that kind of stuff. And just in general, like, yeah, you get low ownership, but the upside is typically not associated with that low ownership. Whereas you can get low ownership. Nobody's going to play a Patriots stack this week. And, like, their offense is good, right? So, and you get a revenge narrative with Stephon Diggs. Let's see. Evening all, what's up, Noah? How you doing? Don't do this. I'd go with HN Wright and Ollie Gordon in the flex. Would not do that. I understand that's all they have, but man, yeah, there's so many other spots other than Miami. So when I look at quarterbacks, the first thing that pops out is Marcus Mariota at 5K. And then the next thing that pops out is the fact that Phillip Rivers is 4,900, and like, I don't think that he'll get more ownership than Marcus Mariota, but I think he'll get some ownership. When $100 more, you could just have Marcus Mariota in like a good game environment, and he's 5K and he runs, and like, I mean, frankly,
300 more, you can get Stroud.
Right. Frankly, that Washington Giants game stack spot is like sick. Two rushing quarterbacks that are like everyone is cheap in that game. Neither one of them are playing for dick. Like that just screams circus game to me is Washington, New York Giants. So, especially if you're trying to fit Puka and Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown and all that kind of stuff. That game looks especially enticing. They're right here next to each other, these two quarterbacks. Now, as far as Matthew Stafford and those stacks versus Lamar Jackson and those stacks, those are going to be the two highest ownership game environments for sure. People I think will probably go, if they go with Matthew Stafford, then they're going to go with Matthew Stafford with Puka and bring it back with JMO. I think that JMO is actually going to be higher owned than you think that he will in those stacks. Not as a one-off, but in those stacks. Because of what he has been able to achieve this year, his price tag is less than Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think that people will look at that and say, I'm just going to cut down and play JMO rather than Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I actually think that Stafford plus Puka plus JMO will be more popular if you go Stafford and Puka. Whereas on the other side, if you go Goff, I think that's where you see Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Puka. So I think that it'll be slight. I think there'll be, they'll both be owned. Both sides that'll be owned. But I actually think JMO will be a little bit higher owned in those combos than you think. For the Lamar Jackson side, I don't know. Lamar Jackson is legitimately hurt. I think he has I don't know what ailment he has, but it's bad. It's going to come out after the season. He's going to go have surgery the instant that they are into the offseason. They're going to lose a game, get kicked from the playoffs, and they're done, right? Joe Burrow on the other side is talking about his own eulogy. He literally thinks that he's just dying every week. And man, that game could absolutely just go to the nails. And look, if it's anything like the way this season has gone, it's going to go all the way into the roof, and it's going to be a 45-38 game, and it's just going to go nuke. But if you were looking at these spots objectively and said, oh, you have a quarterback who hasn't been able to produce all year because he's hurt, and another quarterback who's getting pressured on 70% of his dropbacks, I just wouldn't want to focus on that game. So I'm as apprehensive as you are about that game. Again, I think that, you have New England and Buffalo, which is a great game environment. The Rams versus the Lions, great game environment. You have Washington versus the Giants, great game environment. You have 4 other game environments that are really strong and worth stacking. And then you have Baltimore, Cincinnati. And I really do think that Baltimore, Cincinnati is going to decide the slate this week, because there's going to be ownership on it, and it's going to dictate a lot of different build paths. So if you get that game right, I think that you put yourself on the inside track to cash.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I agree with everything you just said. I think I'll probably mostly, I don't know, I think one way to approach this week is if you're going to play Baltimore, Cincinnati, just full blown game stack it. Just fucking I have one lineup I built on BK that's a Lamar double with a double bring back from Cincinnati. And if I'm playing that game, just go all out and hope it goes fucking crazy, and then hope that the production in the Rams Detroit game gets spread out enough, especially giving the pricing of those guys, that you can survive that game, because that game's going to score points. It's not, if there's no way the Rams Detroit scores 35 points, that game is going to score a lot of points. Is it to score 45, 50, 55? I don't know, but they're going to score points. And so if you don't play that game, you're basically hoping that that it's just the production is spread out enough that you don't get killed by one guy too bad, right? So I think there's 2 points there. One is if you're going to play Cincinnati, Baltimore, I think the common way to do it will be to play Lamar with Likely or Andrews and bring Jamar Chase back. And I don't think that's the way to do it. I think the way to do it is just go full fucking game stack there. I think the second point is, if you're going to play the Rams Detroit, and this is an obvious point, we talk about it a lot with baseball, is if a game scores 53 points or whatever, everybody gets really fixated on one way it's going to happen. And the truth is, if there's 53 points, usually a lot of players get there. And so be willing to be creative. You don't have to play the 1 through 4 batter, right? You can play the 2, 5, 7, 9 or whatever. And so I think that's important to keep in mind. I think the other thing that's hard to think about for these stacks and these games is, and this is kind of a natural segue to the running back / wide receiver discussion, is like the priority spend ups. And our models have like, we can skip one step. I think if you want, you can pull up running back and wide receiver if you want. And there's like 2 points I want to make here. There's essentially like 2 pay ups at running back that everyone's going to play some combination of, which is CMC and Jahmyr Gibbs. CMC got a late Q tag, but I saw that, that might lower him a touch, but I think the industry, like, he's expected to play. It's like a Q tag, but like expected to play. So it'll be interesting to see if we get that news before lock, or people are like waiting to. And if we're waiting, I do think like that will legitimately push CMC down a little bit. But I think we'll probably have enough clarity when he'll still be played. The other running back chalk is Woody Marks, which our models think is really, really bad chalk. It's worth noting that Woody Marks' chalk comes for 2 reasons. Number one, that Houston is hugely favored against whoever they're playing that's terrible. Number one, Arizona, and number two, there's like Chubb and a bunch of Chubb is out. Like Woody Marks is getting like a usage boost this week by the industry because there's injuries for Houston. So it's not like, I don't think it's crazy. It's like a usage bump based on other injuries. Plus, like, they're heavy favorites. But I'll point out that Woody Marks, our models do not like it. And then the other thing with the payoffs at the wide receiver side, you have Puka, you have he's like the main payoff at receiver. Then you have ASB, and then Jamar Chase to some degree, although I really don't think he's going to come in close to those guys. Like I think it'll mostly be Puka by like a mile, and then it'll be ASB to some degree, and then like Chase will be like a little bit owned, Jason will be a little bit owned, but not that much because of their price and because how much people like those other spots. So our models really, really, really think Gibbs is like a priority spend up. Like if you look at Gibbs's range of outcomes compared to CMC, like Gibbs looks better at slightly lower ownership. And I actually kind of believe that. Like I think Stafford plus like Devontae or Puka plus Parkinson plus Gibbs bring back is not that easy to do. And so it starts to force some value that people don't feel that comfortable doing. And to your point, I think a lot of people just use JMO or maybe just go down to Amon St. Brown instead, right? But I think our models are saying to us, like, if you can figure out a way to play Gibbs, play Gibbs. Puka looks really strong too, by the way. Like I'll just point out that Puka looks really, really strong. But the more important point here is that we do have like 3 to 5 really important, strong payoff studs. And that's going to make us, to the prior point around quarterbacks, I think it's going to push us more towards like Mariota, Dart. I think like one really easy approach this week is just to say, you know what, like that Giants Washington game has a fine total. It's like when the Athletics play like the White Sox or something, right? Like 2 shitty teams like in a gross game that like ends up having a lot of scores. And all the players in that game are priced down. Like even Dart's pairing partners, his tight end, Theo Johnson, Wandale's cheap, and then Mariota, you have Terry McLaurin, Debo. Like it's a very easy game to use to free up value to then get up to your favorite choice of Gibbs, CMC, Amon-Ra, like the players from these very good game environments. So I think it's important to decide like who you're gonna prioritize among those spend ups. I think our model strongly think Gibbs is probably the most important one. Puka looks very, very strong too. CMC looks slightly more fadeable. Now, TBD a little bit on CMC's ownership, depending on whether we get his injury cleared up or not before lock, right? But I just want to point that out because I think what you decide to do around those payoffs is going to be really important. The other point I'll make a running back is not unlike other weeks, Gibbs and CMC are going to eat a lot of ownership. Woody Marks is going to eat a ton of ownership this week. And it's going to leave this whole secondary tier of really good running backs at lesser ownership than they should have. And that's this whole group of really good running backs in good spots, which is Saquon on the Eagles against the Raiders, ETN, Jacksonville against the Jets, Derrick Henry in a game that most people are going to use Lamar, Our models love RJ Harvey, Denver against Green Bay. I'm a little wary of that. I feel like Green Bay's defense is underrated in general. Maybe I like Micah Parsons too much. But our models love RJ Harvey. And then some people will use Walker in that game between Seattle and the Colts, where the Colts are wheeling out the corpse of Phillip Rivers. And our models don't love Walker, but I'll point out that Walker and Woody Marks are literally the same exact price. And Woody Marks is going to be mega chalk. And like, I think one thing you can do, and I know our models don't love Walker, but you can use Walker in that Seattle game with the Seattle defense against Indianapolis instead of Woody Marks. And like, it would be unsurprising if they run, Walker a bunch this game. The problem with Walker, we faded him a bunch this year. The problem is he just like hasn't seen the usage to get there. That's why our models don't like him that much. So that's a long-winded way of saying I think there's a few clear pay-up priorities. You have to decide around them. And then there's a whole secondary tier of running backs in really good spots that I think will be under-owned that are worth considering.
I think that was great analysis. Usually I have a lot to add. Today on that one, I don't have a lot to add. Also, note for the future, we should do running backs and wide receivers together all the time, because I feel like this is a natural thing to do that we haven't been doing. So note to self. Remember when I said I don't want to play this week? That was before I saw that Woody
Marks play now.
Was going to be fucking.
That was before the Woody Marks track?
Yeah, because remember, folks, I look at nothing before this show. So this is the first time that I'm seeing that Woody Marks is projected to be 50% owned chalk. I'm back in. They fucking pull me right back in with this kind of bullshit. Why would we do that? That seems like an insane thing to do. I'd much rather stack Houston than play 50% owned Woody Marks. I think you can stack Houston, like CJ Stroud plus Nico Collins, bring it back with Randy Moss fucking reincarnate Michael Wilson on the other side. You could game stack that game if you want to. You can put Trey McBride and Michael Wilson there. Woody Marks at 50% owned. That's terrible. Now, all of that rant that I just said, if Woody Marks was like 15% owned, fine. I want to point out that I'm not against him as a play because of his median or because of his upside. He has had good games, and I think that he's a decent NFL running back, and this is a pretty decent spot. The problem is at 50% owned, when we have RJ Harvey and we have Kenneth Walker and we have I don't know, I'm just going to sort by 3x here and go with just running backs. Because I am sure that we have other plays that are better options than that. So at running back, RJ Harvey, excuse me, at 6K. Ashton Jinty at 5,800, literally almost 0% owned, right? Chase Brown, 6,700, great game environment. Josh Jacobs, 6,900. We've liked him this week. Devin Neal at 5,300. He has had pretty good usage, all things considered. You mentioned Travis Etienne at 6,500. Fine with that. I mean, I'm not playing $5,600 Woody Marks at 50% owned. If I were to run him through the pivot finder, I'm going to guess that he would look like the worst play that we have had ever. So I'm just not doing that. All of that said, I think that at both running back and wide receiver, I'll add wide receiver back. I think you're right that when we look at, right now I have the ownership as Jamar Chase at 27%. I think this comes in lower. I think that you're right that people would rather play Amon-Ra St. Brown in that game environment. I'm going to guess that Amon-Ra St. Brown gets up to 20 and that Jamar Chase is probably around 20. I do think that JSN ends up getting left out in the cold here. I think that we probably see more JMO at 6K. I'm going to guess 20%. I have a cough that's happening right now for some reason. But yeah, Derrick Henry at 7,300, I think is a terrific play off of Lamar Jackson. I think you nailed this analysis. I think that this is a week where the pay-ups are pretty easy to just dictate, and the best thing that you can do is just stay away from Woody Marks. I think if you can say, I'm not going to play Woody Marks, and I'm going to be under on the Baltimore-Cincinnati game stacks. I think you set yourself up really, really well for this slate, and therefore I will play because it's easy for me. It's just easy for me to do that. So you go ahead and take 4 back.
Yeah. So the other thing I asked myself when I was looking at this, I'm like, man, for a 13-game slate, like, I don't feel very strongly about wide receiver. Like running back, I feel pretty strongly about. Like running back, I feel like, okay, like I can see arguments for CMC and that game environment against Tennessee. I can see why I want Gibbs, especially as a bring back. I'm playing some version of Puka Stafford. Even as a mini, like I'm totally fine with Puka Gibbs minis. Like I don't think you need a full blown, like it's hard because, you know, again, that game has such a big game total that you kind of, it's nice to try to get more pieces than just that. And I do think I'm biased towards trying to correlate my tight end with quarterback. So I'm sort of very tempted to play Colby Parkinson with Stafford and Puka and then bring it back with Gibbs. Admittedly, like I think that'll be somewhat popular again, but it's a 13-game slate and I still think people are going to get overwhelmed. And so I'm not sure it's going to be like, you know, it's huge. It's not going to be like 40% or anything in small field. It's going to be like 20%, which is overcomeable in like a 200-man contest, right? But I guess whereas I feel strongly that there's a ton of pivot running backs that we just talked about. So again, Saquon, Etienne, Walker, Henry, RJ Harvey. I don't feel that way about receiver. Like at receiver, I'm going to mostly let my quarterbacks dictate my pairing partners. I do think the Washington Giants game has like remarkable value. Like Wandale and Terry McLaurin and Debo, they all look like really good value with quarterbacks that are really cheap, who you can skinny stack with them if you want, because they're cheap and they run. So again, like that's a really easy approach, is to play Mariota or Dart with one or two of those guys, and then play the payups from those other games that you prioritize. I also think because Woody Marks is chalk, it makes Stroud doubles or even Stroud singles for that matter with this Nico more interesting than they otherwise would be. I'm not as into the bringbacks in Arizona, mostly because of price and mostly because I just think Houston's defense is really fucking good. Like I think Houston's defense is like legit lockdown. We've been saying Brissett's going to die every week and it hasn't happened yet. He's still going to throw the ball 45 times. So he might throw it enough that it doesn't matter if he dies. But I think if any team can lock him down, it's Houston. So it makes me a little bit nervous about Wilson and McBride, especially at McBride's price. Wilson is more viable just because of price. The other thing I'll point out, and it's you know, besides we can talk a little bit about receiver if there's any other takes, but the other thing is tight end. So tight end this week at DraftKings is no different than every other week we've had all fucking year. And I'm going to prove it to you. Not that you need to prove to you because you already know it's true. We've said all year that every tight end is like 1 to 2K underpriced. And that's still the case this week. Like it's been all year. And the easiest way to see that is, I did this before we went on, unless you refresh the models, which I don't think you did, is if you sort players, if you sort wide receiver, running back, and tight end by 3x for players under 5K, okay? I think 14 of the first 15 players are tight ends. If you do 3x, 14 of the first 15 players are tight end. And that's like because tight ends are all 1 to 2K underpriced. I don't have to tell you, like they're all underpriced. I don't know why, but they are. This is something DraftKings has done all fucking year. So people every week say, is this a double tight end week? It's like one of the most favorite questions we get a lot in Discord and in general, we do the Slate Talk is it double? And usually my answer is like there's a lot of wide receiver value. Like there's a bunch of running back chalk because of players that got hurt. So we have like running backs that are cheaper than they should be and starting roles. This week is a double tight end week. And the reason it's a double tight end week is because we have all of these priority spend ups in Gibbs, Jamar Chase, Puka, CMC, and then even the secondary guys that are expensive in Amon-Ra, JSN, right? Like Saquon, like the secondary pieces that are expensive too, they're going to be less owned. And like the only way you can get there really is to play 2 tight ends. Like there's the only other way you can get there is to play Woody Marks. And everyone's going to do that. So if you play like Neal plus double tight end, or Kenneth Walker, plus double tight end, plus Dart or Mariota, you can then afford all the payups. So I'm just like telling people kind of what I think unlocks the slate. Now, you still have to make decisions around who you think the priority spend ups are. Like you have to decide between CMC, Puka, JSN, Gibbs, all these guys. But I think it makes the slate a lot easier if you just say, you know what, like 14 of the top 15 3x values at the flex position are tight ends. Like, why would I not just play 2 of them and then allow myself to play a bunch of the best spend ups, right? Like, to me, that seems really obvious, but I don't know that everyone's going to do it because, again, it's a 13-game slate. People tend to get overwhelmed.
Mike Gesicki is 3,300 coming off like a nuke of a game. Colson Loveland is still right there. Evan Ingram is 3,100. Theo Johnson at 3,500 is like literally the only other warm body on the Giants that can catch a fucking football. AJ Barner is still 3,200 for some reason. And like he gets like an actual role. This is insane. It's a 2 tight end week, unfortunately. One of the things that I've been harping on is 2 tight end, but play Trey McBride in the flex. Now, this is not the week for that. You could do that. This is not the week for that. But this is some crazy stuff. And also, one of the things that it does is it does allow you as well to still correlate your tight end with your quarterback. Like if you wanted to go with a Baltimore stack, you could go with Mark Andrews or Isaiah Likely, right? 3,400, 3,900, and then also play Theo Johnson in the flex, right? Like you can still go with that. So I do agree with you. This is a 2 tight end week. It just can make things really easy if you go with a Washington, New York Giants stack with a 2 tight end and you just stack up the rest of like the giga fucking nuke guys. I think that works really well. And it's funny because you had said that, and we also got a comment that says 2 tight ends seems very popular again this week. Feel like it may not work out, even though there's so many good plays on paper. It's popular because we have that Rams versus Detroit game environment where people want to play those players. And we also have like other really high priced players that just like make sense. We have CMC, we have Gibbs, we have Jamar Chase, JSN, all these different guys who, and with tight ends being legit $1,500 underpriced across the board. Like just from a math perspective, you basically like have to do it.
Yeah. So while you're coughing, so the things we've talked about so far that I just want to recap, because there's one more kind of macro point I want to make. The points we've made is like make the site smaller. Don't be afraid to like cross out a bunch of low total teams. It's just not worth it. Like you don't need to use like the Colts. Like there's no point. There's no reason to use them. Number 2, correlate more than normal. It's a 13-game slate. Like I think if you like one of the games a lot, like be creative around game stacking it. Don't like kind of like take the weak way out and just play like a mini or one like a mini or like a one naked, whatever. 3, get value through your quarterbacks and through tight end. So you can use one of the cheaper quarterbacks if you need to. Again, we like Dart Mariota. I think Stroud is also very interesting given Woody Mark's chalk. I think Stroud will be owned, but I think Mark's chalk will hold Stroud to a reasonable level because it just won't allow Stroud to get out of control. And then don't be afraid to use some of the lesser known pieces in the big total games because, I think that often happens. Like they're like, I have to use this one player. Like if I don't use this one player, like I'm not going to get the goodness of that game. And then the last point I'll make is like, because everyone is so focused on Detroit, Los Angeles, to some degree, Cincinnati, Baltimore, a little bit Washington, the Giants, there are a bunch of other teams with really high totals that they're in those lopsided games we talked about at the beginning. And in those lopsided games, there's going to be some very under-owned players. And the ones that I made a note of for myself are like if you sort by team total, like besides the teams in those games that everyone's using, we have the Niners we talked about. It'll be mostly CMC, although I think Kittle to some degree is also usable. He'll be pretty chalky, especially on FanDuel. The Jags are not going to be very used. They've got the third highest total of 27.75. No one's going to use the Jags. They're going to be totally underowned against the Jets, who suck. And I'm not excited to play the Jags either, but they've got third highest total of 27.75. I think ETN is a really strong play. He's been kind of sneaky all year. Next one down, we have the Seahawks. I think some people use Ken Walker. JSN is going to be totally overlooked this week because he's just priced in a way that nobody's using him instead of using Puka or Gibbs or Amon-Ra. So I think JSN is really interesting in that game. The next one down, I'm going to skip Baltimore, skip Houston because we talked about them. On the Eagles, I think Saquon against the Raiders. Saquon, we all know, hasn't been the Saquon of last year for whatever reason. Scheme, the team hates each other. Maybe he's hurt. Who knows? But if there's one game that he's set up to smash, it's against the fucking Raiders. If there's one game he's set up to smash, it's this game, right? And he's not going to be terribly owned. And then the Bills Patriots game is going to be unused. People are not going to play that game. Now, admittedly, the plays in that game, even in our own models, are kind of tough because they all project okay, but not great. But I'll just point out that is to a large degree mitigated by their complete and total lack of ownership, right? I mean, I think if you think about one lever being projection, whether that's median, ceiling, or point per dollar value, and your other lever being ownership, I'm willing to give a little bit on median and even ceiling if ownership is super low. And so while I'm not super excited about the projections in that game, it's both those teams. Buffalo has a 25-point implied total. New England has a 23.5-point total. I'm not saying you should game stack it, but I think it's kind of crazy that, Cook, Josh Allen, Ramondre, Diggs, a bunch of really good players in both those teams are not really going to be played. And so I think it's just important to keep in mind there's other teams with really good totals. Those are most of the teams I'm interested with really good totals that aren't going to be used a whole lot because of just their price and because of the priority of the other game environments.
Yeah, my turn. I once again, I don't have a lot to add. I think that it makes a lot of sense to look at alternative spots where the game totals are high. I really do think that the New England Buffalo game is the one that, if that game just went absolutely nuts, nobody would be surprised. But people aren't going to play it. We actually did get a question earlier. It was, let's see. There it is. I want to do May, Hollins plus Henry double stack. Would y'all run back a Bills player? And I probably would run back Kincaid because he's fucking free. I mean, you can just play 2 tight end and run back with Kincaid, and that's totally fine. There's no reason why Kincaid can't have, 5 for 70 and a touchdown or 2. There's nothing wrong with that. So I think that's a totally fine way to go about it. This cough's killing me. Overall, yeah, this is a good week to just kind of play the best spots, but not the highest owned spots. Because there's a lot of really, really good spots. And there's a roster construction that just makes it make sense, right? Pay up at wide receiver, pay down at your stack a little bit, right? And play double tight end. And if you go with that, it unlocks a lot of things. You can do that with Seattle because you'll have a pay up at wide receiver, a pay down at tight end, an affordable quarterback, and a 2 tight end setup. You can do that with New York Giants or Washington, right? Both are cheap stacks, and you'll be able to pay up at wide receiver. You can do it with Houston. Take advantage of the Woody Marks chalk. That's probably what I'll do. I'm probably going to stack Houston because it directly correlates against Woody Marks chalk at 50% owned. So that's probably my biggest thing here is that I just want to stick to the roster construction that makes a lot of sense and just play guys that are not going to be the highest owned at their spots.
Yeah. Somebody asked a question, you can probably put up. It says, he wrote, Goombas 34, he wrote, I get that two cheap tight end looks good in the median aspect, but isn't that type play multiple caps or 9% outcomes? The reason I think the answer is no is for 2 reasons. Number one, the tight ends are all 1 to 2 underpriced. And so they in themselves, if they have a good game, will blow out any other relative value. And then the other reason the answer is no is because we have pay up priority. If we didn't have pay up priorities, my answer would be yes. But we do have pay up priorities. We do have Jahmyr Gibbs in that game. We do have Puka Nacua in that game. We do have an under-owned JSN. We do have an under-owned Saquon. We do have CMC, right? And so when you want to play like 2 or 3 of those guys, it's not a 1v1. It's like a 3v3 where like you're either playing the cheap tight end so you can fit a bunch of those pay ups, or you're not. Now the counterpoint is that here's the counterpoint. The counterpoint is, can you get an equally good point per dollar value with more ceiling with the pay down running backs and use 3 running backs? That's the counterpoint. The counterpoint is if you use like Neal, or if you're wrong, if our models are wrong about what he marks, Neal, Walker, like those cheaper running backs, like even ETN's not that expensive. Like, but from the standpoint of like comparing it to double tight end, ETN's not relevant. It's more like the guys who are like 5,500 or lower, 65 or 6K and lower, which is like Neal, Walker, Woody Marks, and like a few other guys down there. And that's kind of like, that's RJ Harvey. I mean, RJ Harvey is like the probably the strongest counterpoint in our models, is that like we think RJ Harvey relative to the industry is really, really strong, and he's pretty cheap. So that's the counterpoint to double tight end. Now, I think a little bit of this is field size related. I personally, for small field where I don't need the absolute fucking nuts for like a 200 to 300 man single entry contest, I'm fine going double tight end and giving up a little bit on ceiling for a pretty strong median, because I want those reliable ceiling players. But I do understand the point of like, hey, what about these running backs that we feel strong about, right? And I think that's like the only counterpoint I would make to the double tight end.
Yeah, I don't even think that RJ Harvey is a counter to double tight end, because I just want to use RJ Harvey at running back. Like I don't even want to use him in the flex. I just think that he's such a good play. Pairing him with Jahmyr Gibbs or pairing him with CMC is probably like, I don't know, just like the spot that I would start on this slate. Woody Marks is really the only way, which, hey, look, more ways to fade Woody Marks to go double tight end. Woody Marks is really the only way that you look at it and you're like,
you needed another excuse. Like you need another excuse.
Yeah, pull my fucking arm. I think that the other one is probably Devin Neal, like has been brought up. And don't worry, Neal is not going to be high owned. I don't think he's going to have ownership. So, this week, and look, your experiment earlier was to look at running back, wide receiver, and tight end under 5K. I sorted by 3K, and like, looky here, here's how you should build for the slate. And like, here's your cheap tight ends. Use 2 of these guys. Here's your pay ups. Use 2 or 3 of these guys. And then, play a cheaper stack with RJ Harvey. And like, there you go. This is your core right here, basically. So if you just wanted to build off of Paydirt's models, that's all that you would really need to do. So I think this is a good slate.
And I'll give you one more like cheat for the tight end. Who do you choose between all those guys? Just also choose the guys correlate with your quarterback. Like if you're using Stafford, use Parkinson. If you're using Dart, use Theo Johnson. If you're using like Lamar, use Likely or Andrews. If you're using use Gesicki across them for double tight end in a little mini game stack if you want. It's just like the easiest. Tight end has become like the easiest position in some ways on BK because it's underpriced and you can correlate with your quarterback. And to me, like that's kind of often what I just do. I built 4 lineups for tomorrow. I'm playing a little bit lighter tomorrow also. I think that just late season and I think there's a lot of pathways that could win this week. All four double tight end. So we'll see if that's how it ends up tomorrow. But I think it's a pretty straightforward slate. Like once you realize that you're like choosing between a handful of pay ups, you're probably paying down at quarterback unless you're figuring out a way to use Stafford in a way that you like. And then you're correlating your tight end, and then there's some priority correlations in high game total environments. And then there's some overlooked really good spots, that the ones we mentioned, other really good totals with players that are not going to be really owned, like Saquon or ETN, that are really nice pivots. So it is a nice slate for like the late season slate. And the reason I'm still playing is because I feel like what we just went through is what most people will not do. Like everybody's burnt out and everyone's tired and everyone's in this like exhausting time between Thanksgiving and New Year's and Christmas. And most people are not doing what we just did and trying to think through the slate the right way. And if you can just do that and then you just build the right spots, you're probably got like a little more edge than normal.
I'll agree with that. All right, I'm gonna hit some questions and then we'll give some final thoughts and get out of here. Where does CMC come in from an ownership standpoint now that he's been downgraded? He's still gonna be high owned. If they didn't come out and say like he's good to go, then it would have dropped his ownership. But he's still gonna be high owned. Full leverage for single entry is Tyrone Tracy, Nico Collins. We didn't talk about Tyrone Tracy, but that's not a terrible play actually. Let's see. Running through. Puka versus JSN and Gibbs versus CMC. I mean, pick your poison. Like our models prefer Puka, but so does everybody else over JSN. I think the ownership discount there probably it's probably a coin flip. Gibbs versus CMC, again, it's just coin flip. Close your eyes, pick whichever one you want to play, and just let it run. Are Neil and Harvey better placed marks by a fucking landslide? Just by a landslide. Harvey is a better projected player by 3 fantasy points, and it's going to be less owned. Neil projects for basically the same, and it's going to be 1% owned. Like when you consider ownership as a cost, both Neil and Harvey it's like not even close. So, fade Hubbard for Dowdle. So somebody had asked me yesterday if I thought that Hubbard was a good play at his price, because he got 17 carries and Dowdle got 18 carries last week. Now, I don't think that they're both going to get 15 plus carries again, but I don't know what to do with that. Like it's a variant spot for sure. So
the answer is you just play neither, play Neil across them.
Like, right. I think you probably prefer Neil, but like I do actually think that both Dowdle and Hubbard are decent like milli maker plays with the way the slate is built. I don't think that it's great, but New Orleans plays at a blazing pace. I do think that both of them have relative upside, but for the most part, for 99% of lineups, if you're not an MME guy and you have like 10 lineups, they're not even close. But if you have 150 and you're in the milli maker, you want to give like 4 or 5 lineups to that split, I do think that there's upside. And that's all I got. So you want to give some final thoughts here, Mr. Pablo?
Yeah, I don't know that I have a whole lot more to add. I mean, I think my takeaways are pretty straightforward. It's like just correlate a little more than normal, cross out a bunch of the low total teams, consider double tight end. If you're not playing Stafford, pay down a quarterback. And then don't be afraid of the secondary running back tier that like many times this year has won people a lot of money. I mean, I'm obviously like CMC and Jahmyr Gibbs as much as anybody does, but like James Cook is going to be unowned in a game with a really high total. Saquon will be owned, but like not nearly as much as those other guys. Derrick Henry will not be that owned against Cincinnati, whose defense is atrocious because everyone's playing Lamar Jackson. ETN is not going to be owned against the Jets, even though he's only 6,500, and Jacksonville's a super heavy favorite. Kenny Walker hasn't done it for us this year, and our models don't love him, but he's like going to be half as owned as Woody Marks at the same price. So I think that whole tier of running backs is really, really interesting. I don't have any hot takes at receiver. I think the players in the Washington game are underpriced. Like I think Wandale's underpriced. I think McLaurin is underpriced. I think the tight end Theo Johnson's underpriced. So I think Jack. I mean, I'm gonna have 4 to 5 lineups tomorrow, and 1 or 2 of them are probably gonna be Jacksonville. That's maybe my hottest take. I just think it's a perfect scenario for him. Like you can play him as a skinny with Theo Johnson or with Wandale or with both if you really want to. You can bring him back with McLaurin, and then you've got so much room then to play the pay-ups you want to play and those good games. And so that's really attractive to me in that game. I think that game will be played a bit because I don't think it's a secret that all those guys are overpriced, but I think it's not going to be like exorbitantly owned. And yeah, I think you made the point before after we talked about Cincinnati, Baltimore. I think deciding how you want to approach that game is really important. I won't play the Cincinnati Baltimore game, and like I'll only play it in one way. Like I'm not going to play Lamar plus likely and then Gesicki. I'm not going to play it like that. If I'm playing that game, I'm going to go a full game stack and hope that overall it just outpaces when you price in the cost of the players, the Stafford Detroit game. And so those are my takes. I don't know how spicy they are, but I think that's kind of like my high level feeling about the slate.
I think the beauty here is that we don't have to have any spicy takes this week. I think the slate is just really, really easy to approach from a roster construction standpoint. You're going to choose a quarterback. You're going to play them with their tight end. You're going to play another cheap tight end in the flex. There you go. There's 3 spots taken up already. You're going to play 2 of the super studs. All right? Doesn't really matter which 2. You want to choose CMC, Gibbs, JSN, Puka, whatever. Choose 2 of the super studs. Play 3 mid-range guys, and that's good. And that's all you really have to do. Like this slate, I think, is actually really easy to build for. And the nice thing is that you have like 6 different ways you can build for it. So I'm coming out of retirement. I didn't even make it out the goddamn door. I'll play this week because I do think that this slate is easy to build for. And I think that from a roster construction standpoint, it's going to make a lot of sense. I'm going to use Portfolio Manager to build out the exact same way that I just said. I'm just going to build things. I'm going to use the constraints to put together lineups that look like that. And then I'm just going to say, fucking Jesus, take the wheel and just let it go. And yeah, this slate seems good. Yeah, that's it. That's all I got. So if you enjoyed this breakdown, you know where to find us. You can find us over at PaydirtDFS.com. Look, up here. See? PaydirtDFS.com. If you are not a subscriber, which there are 223 people who are watching this stream, and okay, so actually we're at like 215 subscribers. So there's fucking 8 of you guys that I know for sure are not subscribed yet. Come grab a subscription. Monthly subscription is only $40 a month. You get everything on the site, $35 a month for NFL. $240 for NBA All Access all the way through the end of May 30th. That'll take you through the beginning of baseball season. Or you can try a week for $20, or you can try a day for $5. Thank you guys so much for the support. I appreciate it. I think this is going to be a good week. It is week 15. We're starting to wind down, starting to get a little bit burnt out, but that's okay. We got NBA and NHL to carry us through. And also, we started doing MMA. I know that we have a break after this one until the next one, but the MMA models have been very promising. So I'm excited to add that in rotation as well. If you guys have questions, comments, concerns, all that kind of stuff, you can reach out to me in the Discord. You can find a link on the site, or you can find me over on Twitter, X, whatever the fuck you want to call it. Otherwise, yeah, hope you guys have a good night. Hit me up tomorrow, and somebody bring a trophy home for me, all right? Adios.
Peace.